Good evening and welcome to Legalize this Sunday, 22nd March 2026. Tonight we confront a reality that Grenada can no longer ignore. Across our communities, there is a growing sense of fear, frustration, and outrage at the persistence and, in some cases, the escalation of sexual and gender-based violence. These are not isolated incidents. They are not aberrations. They are signals that something in our society, our legal system, our institutions, and perhaps even our culture is not working as it should. For too long, the national response has followed a familiar pattern: shock, condemnation, promises, and then too often silence. But tonight we attempt something different. Tonight we listen, and not just to any voices, but to the voices of young Grenadians who have refused to accept that this is simply the way things are. They are organized, they have reflected, and more importantly, they have proposed solutions, serious, structured, and actionable proposals aimed at transforming how this country prevents, responds to, and ultimately reduces sexual and gender-based violence. Tonight I welcome Ruana Williams, Bevon McLean, Zinzee Noel, and Ty Lambert, all members of Grenada Youth Against Sexual and Gender-Based Violence. But before I ask them to introduce themselves or to intervene, I just want to recognize the sponsors of this program, namely Jail Professional Solutions, Inc., GEM FM carrying this program on FM radio out of Canada, and also Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. Good night, ladies, and good night, gentlemen. Good night, Bevon. Good night, Zinzee. Good night, Ruana. And good night, Ty.
Good night to you.
Good night.
Welcome to Legalize.
Good night, good night. Thank you for having us.
Yes, so recently there was this news item regarding some work that your group has done, and that as young people you have shown the confidence, you have taken the initiative and shown the confidence to come together and put together a series of proposals and not just talk and leave them there, but you have actually approached the executive arm of the state, including the highest executive official, so as to get this thing rolling. So if any one of you could just tell us what has spurred you on, motivated you in this direction, because like many others, you could have condemned, you could have gone on the radio, speak, but then go silent and do nothing. But you have taken a different course. Anyone? Ruana?
Sorry, I do apologize. I wasn't hearing clearly. Can you please
You
repeat?
hear me clearly. Everybody, Bevon, you hear me clearly?
I
Yes,
think it was
I can.
it's an issue on my side because the page was not loading for me. Sorry.
Okay. So, Bevan, I just don't know if you want to take us through it. What is the background to you folks coming together in this organization and getting this work done? I know there is a particular context in terms of the escalation of sexual and gender-based violence, but you have responded differently to thousands of other Grenadians. So what has led to that?
Yes, so the response is different. And that was intentional from the very beginning of this group. I initially saw the outpourings of outrage on social media in the streets from random persons, right? And I sat and thought to myself, I sat with that feeling because I myself felt that outrage. I myself understood how that felt, right? Uh, and I decided that I don't think that's the most efficacious way of going about things. I don't think it's feasible. And we've seen this before. I think part of what's spurred us on is that every single one of us here and many other members of this group, we have seen this cycle before in Grenada. Sparks of outrage, then we have a few marches, a few protests, which are tantamount to parades, right? If we really want to talk about their efficacy, we go up on stage, we go through the streets with matching costumes, and we play music and we dance and we call something bad, then we go back to living our lives. And we decided we need to look at this institutionally because that is a huge part of the reason why this issue is so prevalent in Grenada. Uh, and we decided to do something tangible in that regard.
So in other words, you did not just see these as a series of isolated incidents, but you figured that there is something systemic about it.
Yes,
Am I
for sure.
correct?
There is. Yes, 100%. And I'm sure Ty and Ru and Zinzee can get into detail on it, but we have looked at this. We've seen that this is most definitely not a case of, oh, some random man with mental issues, because the statistic as it currently stands is 1 in 3 Grenadian women are victimized sexually in Grenada. 1 in 3 is not a statistical anomaly at all. It is the norm. It is to be expected. And if we have to be honest with ourselves, I think the best thing we can do is acknowledge that a statistic like that needs remedy, and it needs institutional remedy, it needs social remedy, it needs personal remedy as well.
Okay, so in that, with regard to remedies, I guess the first step you saw was bringing others of a like-minded young people like yourself together and basically seeking to work on a course of action. How are receptive when there are 4 of you here, but how receptive your peers were to this radical idea of coming together to advocate and be active and activism in this area? Ty, you just want to say something, but you're muted.
Yeah,
Yes, if you come here.
I hope you all can hear me. But I do want to point out that organization, particularly when it comes to this, I don't want to label it as something radical because it is something that's necessary. Because at the end of the day, this is human lives that we're talking about, and advocating for that is 100% what's important. When it comes to public reception, I'm sure like Bevon, Ruana, and Zinzee could speak more on that because they've been the ones having these conversations with other groups and on other forums. I do think, or something that I have noticed, is that as we spoke about before, there is an outreach, but I feel like there's also a level of comfort that comes a week and 2 weeks after any inciting event occurs. And I mean, comfort breeds a ground for more situations like this to come up. And I guess I don't want to say now is the time. I feel like the time should have happened a very long time ago, but it's important for us to speak up. It's important for us to call for government and call for leaders to do something about the situation.
Yes, when I use the term radical, I kind of in quotation marks, but
That's okay. I understand what you're trying to say.
I was also using it because there's the perception that, in particular, young people, they look at themselves, and that these issues, if you don't touch them personally, they are not minded to put out effort and to display commitment. So I use the term radical to say that, in a sense, you are demonstrating to the society that this is not a whole story in terms of,
Right.
of young people, you know,
Mhm.
and it's quite a lot. So, Zinzee, so exactly what has been done? I know there have been some meetings, and so exactly what has been done, as much as you can tell us.
What has been done? Well, we did form the group, and we have a lot of persons in the group so far. I can see like approximately 100 persons, and a group of us, a few of us from that group, formulated the letter to the Prime Minister. So we looked at the laws and things that we thought that needed to be added, things that we thought that needed to be changed, because there were a lot of outdated concepts, and so we looked at the laws holistically and how we can better improve what is there. And also we are looking at, what we can do going forward in terms of, social media outreach, or like on the ground work, what we can do in that regard.
So you said about 100 of you?
Yeah, in the groups, so far, yes, 100 persons.
That's quite impressive.
Yes, I can. Yes, it is.
So over what period of time would you have looked at the laws and so as to come up with suggestions and proposals for changes and amendments? And of course, I guess it's beyond the laws because, as Bevon pointed out, this is probably more than just the law because there are institutional issues involved here. So over what period of time have you been active at working on this? Ruana?
Um, well, from the timeline was that from Alejandro's death, we started the group.
From when?
And then from Alejandro's death,
Oh, yes, okay.
after the either the weekend, right after, that's when we officially that's when Bevon put out the open letter, and the group was formed shortly after. And then within about the coming week after the petition, we started to talk about making a petition. And then we had a few meetings where it's like, what should be in the petition? We asked people, hey, what do you think should we add? What do you think we should research? And then from all those suggestions, over from the week after February 6th, right up until March, we were combing over, we gathered the points we wanted to research into, and then we looked into the law for what it said under each point, and then we decided to make our recommendation based on what we saw.
And Alexandria she was a student at SGU?
Alejandra was a student at SU, yes.
Yes, and some of you, if not all of you, are students at SGU also?
3 of us are, yes.
3 of you are students at SGU. Okay, so I guess what was the response like at SGU to her unfortunate demise?
Unfortunately, I was disappointed with SU's response. To be quite frank, I remember calling Bevon and just being upset because right after her death, the student organizations just put out a copy and paste message about psych services, and it felt very insensitive. It felt like we're just doing this. It felt very corporate around her death, and it was very disappointing because she was a 3rd-year nursing student. She would have graduated that year if it wasn't for other circumstances. She would have graduated already, and I feel like she would have made a greater impact than that, because at her funeral, the SU officials at her funeral were talking about the impact that she made. Yet for all, after her death, that impact was not seen, because there was an email sent out, an email basically saying condolences to the family. But overall, it felt like SU just put something out there, just to say, all right, we said something. And then that was it. And I remember being very outraged. And then even at her funeral, it felt disrespectful, because yes, these are the people that are teaching me currently. Yes, these are the people that are supposed to be mentoring me currently at my studies. However, it felt so disrespectful that at her funeral, instead of talking about what Alejandra did and who she was, they were talking about what SU did, who they called within SU, who they talked to within SU, not talking to her family. I mean, yes, they kind of mentioned that a little bit, but it wasn't about her. It was about the fact that they did something. And that felt disrespectful to the life that she lived, the short life that she lived, and what everyone in her family said she stood for. Because listening to her family stories about her, you could hear that Alejandra was this lively person, this person who brought life into the room, who encouraged people, who strived to be her best self, who did everything within her power to help somebody. But then you have her death, and then everyone is just talking about the fact that she went to SU. And that's all they just putting her as. That is not something I believe that she should be put forward as. It was disrespectful, plain and simple.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment on that?
Well, I agree with the sentiments that Ruana has. I agree with SU's response not being that, but in many ways, SU is a microcosm that gets to exist outside of the trappings of regular Grenadian society. Uh, and while they were disappointing, I we want to meaningfully address Grenada, right? And of course, SU is part of that. SU is still part of Grenada, despite what some people may feel or think. Uh, and I think they could have done more, definitely in that regard, considering how well resourced they are as well. SU is a huge contributor to Grenada's GDP, and the resources that they have on hand, both psychosocial and financially and otherwise, were things they could have leveraged more meaningfully for the families, for the students who were affected, some of her friends, whatnot. They did exempt people to go to the funeral because that was during midterm week. But outside of that, I'm not, and of course, EDU administration can correct me if I'm wrong on this. They didn't do much outside of that. And I most definitely think that at a time like this, institutions should be beholden to the people that they serve. And people like Alejandra are people that these institutions serve.
And of course, I'm sure that there can be an opportunities to put that right. If a representation is made, so for example, to the effort and the initiative that you have already taken to maybe get some assistance in that in her memory. But I just want us to move now to the concrete, some of the concrete suggestions you have and concrete proposals you have come up with. So you came together as a group, prepared a document, and you took it to the Honorable Prime Minister. That's correct, right?
That is correct, yes.
Right. And in that, you analyzed or sought to analyze what you consider to be the factors which contribute to this scourge in our society and also you identified what you consider to be gaps. I guess starting with the way that our youth and in particular young men are socialized. And I think you have suggestions in terms of what could be done with young people and the education, including educational institutions.
Oh,
You want to mention any of this?
oh yes, for sure. Because the way young men, boys are socialized is so crucial to uncovering this puzzle in heavy air quotes, because I don't think it should be a puzzle at all. Because of how prevalent it is. We already know what the issue is. The way young boys and men are socialized is, as and I've constantly said this, is one that is fundamentally incompatible with being the alleged protectors that they claim to be for the women around them. Uh, and we need to teach them how to properly relate to women, aka 50% of our population. It shouldn't be something that where we shouldn't be living in a country where we're reinforcing rigid gendered binaries, and reinforcing and rewarding certain behaviors. I constantly talk about how a key mechanism for male socialization is social reward. Now, social reward comes in the form of reward from peers and reward from the older men around them, which sort of affirm their gender, affirm their masculinity, so to speak. And a lot of the things that we are currently rewarding are things that are incompatible with creating a safe society for our women, our children, and a lot of them don't seem to realize this, our boys as well. Uh, so things like the dehumanization of women, the glorification of vapid sexual exploits, particularly through the context, through the lens of conquest. That because of course we're not here to say that conversations around sex are bad to have. Quite the opposite, actually. I think conversations around sex should be something that is more pushed. We should be educating people more about this so that they can be more properly informed, so that they can be equipped with the tools to protect themselves. But what I particularly want to tackle is how we constantly push this narrative of conquest to little boys, and then the social validation that they seek by engaging in those behaviors. And it's so incredibly systemic. It's systemic. It's in schools. It's seen from the men around you. It's seen in so many facets of a little boy's life. By the time he gets to the age of 18, in many cases, it's already too late.
But how would that be done? Because if, as you say, they look for the validation and they look for the rewards and the acclaim and the attention from older men who are engaged in the conquest psychology, for if you may put it that way. How do we get out of that?
Yeah, so I think, of course, I think this is a really, really complex issue to deal with. But if we want to start off with a concrete starting point, I think role models is a really good way to start. And when I let me explain what role models is, because usually people hear this and they say, yes, we should have more male role models, and they point to the the disproportionate amount of female teachers and single mother households, etc., etc. But I don't think that's the issue. I think we should have a variety of role models that teach a certain brand, that teaches them to be confident in their masculinity, without having to exert power, or feel the need to perform those rituals, I like to say, for the validation of bigoted men. So let's talk about this concretely. How would we say implement that in a school system? We can have an action plan where we have uh, sessions, say once every week or once every 2 weeks, with a role model, and it's very important that that role model. A lot of people think that the role model has to be male. I don't think that's the case at all, because it also reinforces this idea that men should only be speaking to other men, and their opinions They should only accept opinions that are valid from other men. So I disagree with the role model having to necessarily be male to engage with a young boy properly. So we have a variety of role models coming to our schools. That's a plan here, right? They come every 2 weeks, and they have different seminars about a variety of topics. They usually go down to earth with these kids, right? So they try to relate to these kids as much as possible. So they talk about the issues that kids would be relating to in a playground setting. We talk about peer pressure, talk about how they talk about little girls, they talk about stereotypes, they talk about preferences for different colors, etc. We try to create places where these boys can feel safe. Uh, and I think that would go a really long way. Now, what we should do though is make sure that this is something that has clear metrics that are tracked and targeted each time, so that we can actually track the effectiveness and we can actually tweak and gauge the program to see how much of an impact it is making.
What kind of metrics you have in mind? Meaning, by metrics we mean ways of measuring and measuring the
Yes,
impact. What you have in mind? How
right.
you do this?
So yes, for example, the one with reference to the school setting, we can track metrics like engagement with school. One, we can track other metrics like we can have little surveys every few months, which tracks their opinions on their female classmates. So we can track all of those things, and I think those are some quick metrics, really important metrics we can start off with for something like that.
But how isn't it that we are swimming against a strong tide, because at the same time these young people are exposed to certain types of music which preach violence against women and objectify women. You're on TikTok, you're on the movies, you bombarded. So how do we swim against that tide?
Sorry. I honestly, I feel like you cannot control the type of media that children consume or the type of things they're, because it doesn't even, it's not just with social media, it's also conversations that could be had in the house as well. But in reality, children spend most of their days in school, which I think is why it's important to incorporate these, educational practices into their school life. How do we combat it? The best thing that we can do is implement it in the first place. Try to foster healthy conversations with kids, try to foster or let them have healthy conversations with one another and hope that guides them to make the correct decisions. I grew up listening to music that was very, very suggestive, and I can't sit here and be like, that influenced me to make the decisions that I made because I was brought up differently than the music I was or grew up listening to, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's sorry, I got too ahead of myself, but that's the best thing that I could think.
Would you think that it would help if, for example, some of the popular music, right, be they from Grenada, Trinidad, Jamaica, the US, wherever, which depict these negatives and which are popular? One way might be to actually confront this music and be like to sit down, discuss them with youths, and to really point out what is negative about them. You think that
those
will assist at all?
conversations can be had, don't get me wrong, because there was a point in time when a lot of the music that we listened to had a lot of what's it called? What's the word I'm looking for? When you're singing something and you don't really mean what you're trying to say, but it means something else, so that kids and adults could listen to it. Like we used to have that in music, but we don't really have that anymore. Sorry?
Double meaning.
Yeah, there's a word I'm looking for that can, like, double entendre, kind of.
Double entendre, okay.
Right. Yeah, you can have those discussions with kids.
Yeah, but some of the double entendre maybe is the least of the problems, because I think those, because sometimes the people sing them and they don't know what they mean, like when young people innocent, but those that are explicit. That's what I'm talking about.
Right. No, I understand what you're saying. I'm saying we don't have, I mean, music is very explicit nowadays, which I understand. I don't want to put all the blame on certain behaviors on music. But do I think that we can have conversations about that and why certain things that people are saying could be wrong or suggestive? Yeah, of course. I think we should be open to having those conversations.
Recently, I noticed that. Sorry, you were.
Sorry for interrupting. I just want to piggyback off what Ty said, especially the point where she pointed out that even though she was listening to this type of music, the way she was raised caused her to not really follow that stream that type of music is going down. It goes to how we culturally, as Bevon say, culturally socialize men, because even though yes, this type of music exists, ultimately what is going on in the child's home and what is being taught to that child outside of the music is what's actually really going to affect how they view society and how they view the world. So yes, I do believe that we need to have a conversation about media. As Ty said, I do believe we need to have a conversation about media, but it's more so about the cultural backing that media has that really contributes to that negative outlook.
Yeah, I was going to say recently I noticed that some of our top athletes, I saw Anderson Peters, I saw Lyndon Victor. They actually did some adverts, against gender-based violence. And I noticed also at the intercall there was this young man, I think from SAS. I don't know if any of you saw it. He actually displayed.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I saw him on an interview on the radio, and he was saying that he said that I come from a home where I'm the only male. I have my mother and two sisters. Yeah, and I guess that he's very appreciative of them, and he was portraying that message. The point is this: that in seeking to have change, you have to identify change agents, people who can be put out there as agents of change to get the message across, to communicate the message. That's not the whole picture. You need to do other things, but I just raised that. Yeah. Okay, so in addition to the schools, I think you have also you have looked at the justice system, and you have also made proposals regarding that because you consider that there are gaps and there are challenges for people who are victims or survivors of gender-based violence in accessing the judicial system. What concretely did you propose, and what concretely are you looking to have change with regard to that? Zinzee, we lose you now. We're not seeing you and we're not hearing you. You probably have internet problems. But any one of you.
You're speaking about the proposal that was sent to the Prime Minister, correct?
Yes, yes.
I mean, it was a very comprehensive proposal. There's a lot of things that were mentioned. One, I mean, we spoke about education as it is. We had our short-term, medium-term, long-term goals. So yeah, education, social or survivor-centered justice reform. I guess also editing the definition of consent, and then also being inclusive of like persons with disabilities, people in marital relationships, what quote unquote penetrative rape look like, abuse of authority, situations like that. It was very, very comprehensive. I don't know if anyone else wants to dive more into any specifics, but yeah.
You muted, Ruana.
Sorry about that. But yes, as Ty said, and it's one of you mentioned earlier about like public reception as well. It's one of the things that we have received the most of. One of the feedback we have gotten is that from people who haven't actually read the petition, is that we don't know the laws of Grenada, and we haven't actually done our research. And to that, I want to say that although, yes, because the proof that they put forward for that is that there are people who have received justice, and there are people who have been convicted. There are people there are perpetrators who have been convicted. There are survivors who have received justice. But the amount of people who have been convicted is such a small amount. As Bevon pointed out, it is 1 in 3 women in Grenada who have experienced some form of sexual violence. Are 1 in 3 those perpetrators been convicted? Are those perpetrators in jail? Have they received any sort of punishment for what they did to these women? And that's what we were pointing out. Despite that, we did get more so that we are naive young people who actually we see something and we have energy and we want to fight and we want to do this and we want to do that, when it's really and truly not that. We actually sat down and did research, because this petition has come a long way. In the early stages of the petition, we had a lot of incorrect information. We did not see like a lot of the amendments that came in the last 10 years, the last 15 years. We had to add that more recently. Let's see, something I actually wanted to go into was, and this is something as a direct result of contribution from the group, which is specifically the definition of consent. Just give me a second. I have the thing here. Right. The definition of consent agreement to participate in a specific sexual activity expressed through clear words or actions with consideration of persons with disabilities or persons who utilize alternative forms of communication and maintained consistently throughout the interaction. And there's more to it, but this is something I think that if someone doesn't read the entire petition, that they should read at least that and realize that we actually poured hours into research, and we actually want to see not just a surface level change, but a deep change in our constitution and in our legislation.
I guess your concern there is that what you raise, I think it's one of the things that I thought she agreed. Right? And your position is that is not enough.
And yes, and the thing is, I'm not saying this as a way to shade a lot of the men that experience this. However, when you actually talk to these men and ask them, hey, what happened? Why did you, like, the girl is saying that you assaulted her. What actually happened? A lot of the times they would say, oh, well, she was drunk, or she did some substance and I thought she was into it because she was aroused. Mm-hmm. Insane thing to say. Like, that is not consent. So obviously our bodies are going to react to certain stimuli a certain way. So just because you think that she's aroused doesn't mean that there's consent there. And especially for the fact that a lot of the times alcohol is involved, and we know that alcohol impairs our cognitive abilities. So if someone who has had 1 or 2 drinks won't drive, why would that person consent? How can you believe that that person consent? That person does not have the ability to look on the road and avoid traffic. And yet, for all, you believe that that person is capable of consent. And because of that, that means your actions were not wrong.
Yes, so that of course will be I can understand that being a sensitive one, and there'll be different viewpoints on that, but it's proper that you advocate on it, because through advocacy pushback, I think that we'll get it right. But you as your point of view is that the law does not strike the appropriate balance.
It's also important to note that a big part of advocacy also comes from the fact that a lot of the current laws, which I mean, Ruana said we did research on, are incredibly outdated. The language that's used is incredibly outdated. I think that there was a reference to an individual with disabilities as imbecile, and I'm currently a medical student. We don't even use that term anymore in medicine. It's not a formal diagnosis. So language like that, it just, it goes to prove, or it goes to show that a lot of people are not being protected by the laws that are currently in place, and that should take precedence at the end of the day.
Right. And then of course another concern is that with regard to enforcement, I think one of your concerns is that the entire process of somebody the process that one who has been a complaint has to go through could be very intimidating and actually re-traumatize the person.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm not going to mince any words on this. I think the current mechanism in place is actively, and I'm choosing my words very intentionally, and I'm not going to take them back. I think the current system we have in place is extraordinarily antagonistic to victims, right? I don't think that is an exaggeration, because both anecdotally and from a mass outpouring of individuals, they've expressed a disinterest and a lack of faith in the institutions we have in place. Our current divisions in the police department to deal with these issues, people don't have faith in them. We've seen multiple public outpourings. As a matter of fact, just recently, there was a vigil held by this group, Empower Her Caribbean. And at that public vigil, a young lady came and made a public call asking for help with a situation that she was embroiled in with an abusive man that she was trying to escape. And she recounted her stories of how she tried to escape this man, and she went to the police, and the police said that they couldn't help her. They turned her away. We also need to examine what are the mechanisms that they have in place. So what are the policies that they have in place when dealing with these sensitive situations? So for example, people who are trained at a suicide hotline, for example, they have specific scripts that they're trained on. They're trained on specific guidelines. They're trained on de-escalation. They're trained on creating a safe actual space for people who can come in with these things, and they can actually receive the help that they need. We do not in this day and age need police officers to be asking a victim what you are wearing, because that is something I heard recently. Someone hearing that a police officer is asking, oh, what was she wearing? Oh, there are police officers in the police force right now who have the belief, right? The very dangerous belief that driving factor for the mass sexual violence in Grenada is the promiscuity of the young women. And that's a narrative that needs to shift, especially with the legal personnel who should be protecting people like that.
One of your proposals is that there should be specialized training. Is that one of that in your petition?
Yes, 100%. We tackled specialized training, and we do encourage people to actually, as Ru was talking about before, actually read the proposal. We have very specific directives in place for how we go about actually bringing about that. we want the establishment of a unit who is specially trained in that, and of course the immediate rebuttal will be, oh, we already have that. I would counter with, no, we don't. Otherwise, victims would feel safe going to these persons. These people aren't adequately trained, and they never have been. And we need to tackle that. This isn't a moment to be blaming people or pointing fingers. This is a moment where we're acknowledging a problem, and we're saying, hey, everyone, all of us together, all of the relevant stakeholders, the citizens, the police officers, the victims, we want to come together to fix this problem. We're not saying, oh, yeah, we're blaming the police officers, and we're mad at them. No, we're coming to them and we're simply presenting an issue that currently exists, a gap that is in our system, and we are just trying to fill it.
Yeah, you were saying something with that?
I wasn't going to say anything, but I completely agree.
Okay, then. I thought I was going to add something. You
I
also,
just sorry.
you go ahead, yes.
No, I just wanted to add something where they said, like, as Bevon said, a lot of people are saying that we have these things in place already, that it's already there. And we're not like, the system is there, but the system does not function as it should be. And this inconsistency is what is actually creating the problems for survivors. Like, yes, you can say that we have certain protocols, we have certain guidelines for getting people justice. But because not everyone who commits the crime gets the same punishment or gets a similar punishment, it still produces inconsistency and still is injustice for survivors.
Well, I guess the response to that, and how will you answer this, is that sentencing is something that is specific to the particular offender, the particular offense, and the circumstances, so that you don't have just one sentence for everything. You muted, Ruana. You muted.
Oh no, I was sorry. I was saying that
You was
why
talking about
is it
variation in sentences.
yeah, why is that the case? And we're asking people, because as we mentioned, me and Bevon went to a forum where there were officers there, and we are asking them, hey, why is that the case? A lot of times they were saying that they consider background information on the person, previous crimes the person has committed, and we're saying that shouldn't be the case.
So you think there should be one sentence across the board?
I agree. Yeah, I believe so, because I mean,
Okay.
if somebody steals something of a certain value, won't they get a certain level of sentencing because that thing is of a high value? If someone murders somebody, it is still murder. So why is it only when it comes to sexual violence that it's all these different categories, when if it's rape, it is rape. It shouldn't be anything other than that. It should be treated as such and sentenced as such. We should not be considering past crimes. We should not be considering the person's background. We should not be considering that if the crime is committed, then the crime needs to be punished. That's just baseline.
Yeah, but I guess the level of punishment will be the issue. Yes, punish, but shouldn't you have let's say a minimum and then also a maximum that you apply based on the circumstances of the crime and the circumstances of the offender, the potential for rehabilitation and all of those things?
I understand what you're saying with the minimum and maximum sentences, and I understand why it does exist. However, when it comes to circumstances for the crime, when it comes for sexual assault, that's an active, unnecessary choice. When it comes to a situation like theft, like murder, you can see an individual, for example, who was stealing because they needed to feed their family or accidentally kill someone in self-defense. There's no circumstance where rape or sexual assault is an okay thing to do. So I think that kind of plays into the whole why we would consider the circumstance of the crime, if that makes sense, and why that should determine the sentencing. Does that make sense?
Okay, so
Am I making sense?
yeah, but no, I'm just going on.
Okay.
I'm just yes. So I think you part of your petition refers to the so-called Romeo defense. The
Sorry, can
Romeo
you?
defense, the Romeo defense arises in circumstances where there is a small disparity in the age. So, for example, a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old,
Mhm,
a 15-year-old, because the age of consent is 16.
mhm.
But if you may have a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old involved, uh, it's still considered rape, statutory rape as they call it, if the victim is below the age of 16. But wouldn't you say that, for example, you would treat a circumstance where, for example, a 40-year-old engages in sex with a 15-year-old versus a situation where an 18-year-old engages in sex with a 15-year-old? You think they should be treated the same?
Should they be treated the same?
Mhm.
I mean, from a scientific standpoint, and I'm in medical school, so it is something that I do consider. Part of the reason why the age of consent exists is because an individual's brain is not fully developed until they're 25. So when it comes to a 40-year-old versus an 18-year-old, of course, I'm going to see those two situations as completely different. Because a grown 40-year-old man, brain fully developed, should not be chasing after a school child. Like, to me, that math doesn't add up. So in that circumstance, I do understand that maybe a harsher sentence could be given to a 40-year-old versus an 18-year-old. Yes. Is it still statutory rape with an 18 and a 15-year-old? Yes, it is.
Yeah, but I think the justification for that is that there are different circumstances, whole different variation of circumstances in which all different kind of offenses could be committed, and therefore sentencing should be an individualized. Yes, there are legal standards for guilt, but
Mm.
once it is established, then you have to look at other factors now, because uh, what was your position? What is the position you have taken in your petition with regard to rehabilitation of offenders? Because that's normally one of the consideration of a court in terms of sentencing.
Yes, so rehabilitation is a big part of this picture, right? Now, rehabilitation, because Ty was talking about the massive age disparities, whatnot. I think rehabilitation in the case of an 18-year-old, it's a much more feasible option, 100%. When we're dealing with a young man who would have done things, and I don't want to say, oh, he made a mistake. A lot of people like to go with this defense of, oh no, he's a young man, he just made a little mistake. He has a bright future ahead of him, and as a result, he's afforded a lesser penalty, or in some cases, egregious cases, no penalty at all. We need to remove whatever mechanisms in place can allow for something like that to happen. That should never happen. But I don't believe in just chucking him in a prison and just keeping him behind a cell. I think rehabilitation while they are serving their sentence is key to them coming back into society more well adjusted and better equipped to not commit an offense like that in the future. So rehabilitation is a big part of what we're proposing, both not just inside the prison but outside for them, social support for them when they leave prison as well.
What's the position taken by your group on the debate on the sex register, sexual offender register? I know there's a lot of discussion in the society and regarding that and so. And there's a view that there should be a law that you should register sexual offenders and all of this. What's the position the group has taken on that? In the petition, I mean.
We believe that there should be a sex offenders registry. Like we understand that there's discussions. There have been discussions around registry for a very, very, very long time, because every time we mention it, everyone is like, well, there's already discussion, there's already petitions, there's already recommendations drafted and that have been sent to government for a registry to be created. But there is still no registry. So it is important that we reinforce the fact that there should be a public database where people can access, regular people can access and see that there's a registry and see who is on that registry to protect themselves. Because I was looking at the law that actually caused America, well, the United States of America, to create a sex offenders registry. And it was because of a little girl in a neighborhood, and their neighbor was a recently released offender, and he kidnapped the girl and killed the girl. And everyone was saying, if they knew that that man was an offender, if they knew that there was an offender within the neighborhood, because he joined the search for her when she went missing. He was in the search party. So if they knew that that man was an offender, maybe they could have found her before she got killed. Maybe they could have prevented her death. And it's the same thing with Alejandra. If there was a registry, maybe Mr. Richards could have been caught before he killed her. Maybe someone could have seen him and recognized him and say, you know, that's the guy that is dangerous and is something they're looking for now. Maybe they would have been able to get him before, or maybe they would have been monitoring before he was able to commit these crimes again. So it just reinforces the fact that it's so important to have a registry, and it's so important to know who these people are, and it's important to also monitor them.
Okay, so the program is legalized, so I must say that for whatever it's worth, that it is still an allegation against him. I know the common view is that he did it, but at least there's still that presumption of innocence. So I just want to say that in the interest of the way we run the program. But going back, if there was a register, and yes, we know he was convicted before of a sexual offense, right? But just having a register, you think will really sensitize people or to the fact that, look, there's someone who may be dangerous because they have a past, and they may be dangerous and they are outside. Just having a register, I think that will be sufficient.
A register on its own, of course not. And I'll let Ty go into more detail on it. But a register on its own, of course, isn't going to be enough. But we do think that it serves a very, very important regulatory role and monitoring role.
Absolutely, 100%. Yes, it definitely does. The purpose of a registry is, one, not for shame. I do understand that there is a culture or a level of, feeling fear of being shamed with a registry. But a registry is the government's responsibility to be transparent with the public about the type of people that are in the community. And I think that's the most important thing, is that they're being transparent about the people that are on the streets, or the people that are around schools, or the people that are riding a bus with them. I think it's important. I think it does protect people, or it does help people be aware of their surroundings. And as we said, in the case of Alejandra, this is, once again, we know it's alleged, but he was someone that was released for very, very after committing very, very serious crimes. And I think it is a shared sentiment with the public that we should have been alerted that he was out on the streets. And why were we not alerted in the first place?
Okay, but there is actually a law in place that provides for monitoring of offenders. Not all offenders, but the law gives the power to monitor offenders who are released. Yeah. So, and that power and that obligation is one for the state, the prison and the police. Don't you believe that such a system will be even more effective than a register? I'm interrogating that because I know the view and this popular view, a register. Yeah. The register definitely will be an instrument, a tool of shame. Yeah. But how effective would a register be in terms of achieving the result of protecting the community, which is the real objective? Do you really think, as sometimes you get the view that people feel the register is a panacea for that, it will solve the problem, and in a way it lets it releases those in authority from monitoring, from putting other protective measures in place, because we are a small community. Right? Anyone who goes to prison for a serious offense, as serious sexual offense upon release, Grenada is a small place. So my concern is that we don't lose the objective of protecting people from persons who may have the propensity, the capacity, the inclination to reoffend in a serious way, you know, that we actually find the correct tools to protect the public. Because we have to remember that at the end of the day, we still have a constitution and people are entitled to the freedom, the liberty, and so somebody does the offense, they spend the time in prison, the court is the one to give the sentence, they come out. Yeah? That's what we face. So we have to strike the balance in the correct place. That's only that's why I asked that. And I guess you will pick up that I'm skeptical that
Yes,
just
of course. And
the reliance just on the register, as I'm hearing, that it is a solution to the problem that we face.
no, it is by no means our all-encompassing solution, panacea, cure-all to this issue. It never has been. It's only one small part of a proposal with 17 different components in it. But
Correct.
let me explain. What I fundamentally think. I don't think the registry is at odds or mutually incompatible with other forms of monitoring and other accountability mechanisms, right? Because a registry, if it is well executed, is one that will also protect the 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 the, the civil liberties and the human rights of the perpetrators on said registry, right? As Ty talked about before, it is not a mechanism to simply shame, right? Of course, we have to acknowledge that shame is a factor that is inevitably going to come into play with a public registry of that nature. But the goal, particularly of a registry in this case, not just is it a mechanism to protect the people in communities who would potentially not know otherwise, but it also is a deterrent. Because as you talked about before, and I'm glad you made that point, Grenadian society, we have very, very small and in many cases extremely tight knit communities, especially in rural areas, for example. The pattern might shift a little bit once you get close to more urban areas like St. George's. But in a lot of rural areas, it is fairly tight knit. Everybody know each other, as we say, right? and it would serve an important deterrent role. People won't want to be on the registry, and I
Correct.
think that's an important factor as well. And of course, I don't think a registry gives the government, say, the go ahead to just go hands off with terms of in terms of prisoner and past offender monitoring.
Okay, so let me just take a few of the comments that we have here. Someone, I guess we know, says, "Good evening. Hope this to be a meaningful and enlightened program." Gilles Josias Louis. That's a email also. Then someone says, let me just see, how do the actions of women who uphold traditional patriarchal views affect our current efforts to combat GBV on the island? Is this side of our reality a bigger obstacle than we realize? I guess I speak about traditional patriarchal views. Someone says also, we can come back to that. Bevon's point about women being role models for boys, and issues also that us as boys are raised to have only sexual relationship with girls and not otherwise meaningful. Female role models helps this. Very good. Cyrus Griffith is asking, you see, having a register is good, but will it be made public with pictures attached so that the public will know who are these people? That's Cyrus Griffith's comment.
I mean, well, of course, I think an identifying image would be necessary in a case like that, because a name on its own doesn't have enough. One of the goals where we're asking again, we're going back to the same thing. What is the goal of the registry? It is to inform people about a potential perpetrator, and an image goes a very, very long way in terms of helping people identify these individuals. So I think that would be necessary.
Okay. What is your view? I don't know if it's expressed as to whether sexual offenses should be tried, as they say, in camera in private, or whether you should continue having the public trial.
I didn't hear the end of the question.
Yes, there's an issue that, and already there's legislation, for example, where when the offense involves a young person, it has to be, the trial is to be held in private. You don't have it as a public trial. You cannot name the victim publicly and so. So I'm asking, what's your view? And I don't know if it is included in the petition as to whether trials for sexual offenses should be held in private without naming the victim. So there are two aspects in. One, should it be held in private? And two, should the victim remain nameless, even if it is held in public?
I believe that the victim should get a choice in that, because there have been a lot of cases where, like for instance, I personally know of this, like someone who I went to school with who was a survivor. And after her ordeal, people were calling her names after the case, like calling her, well, I'm not going to say specifically what they called her, but because people knew that it was her because it was publicly named and she had no say in it, she was almost constantly reminded of what she went through because of what people were saying. I mean, it's school children, so children are going to say stuff. So I think that at the very least, the survivor in the case should get a say in whether or not they would want at least their name publicized, whether they want on the news or in the court hearing, whether or not they want to they would want media there or they want people to see them there. They should at least get a say in that because a lot of times they don't.
Okay, so we'll end in a few minutes, but before we do so, I just want to recognize the sponsors of the program. Gel Professional Solutions Inc., Jim FM carried this program on FM radio in Canada and also Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. So, closing comments, any one of you? You can go in whichever order. Okay, we'll go anti-clockwise. We start with Ty.
Closing comments. I think it's important to have these discussions, but I also think it's important that these discussions actually come into fruition and action. I genuinely hope, and I hope in the near future that we see these changes being taken place. I mean, we're already taking the first steps as it is, as a community, to try and engage in social conversation, to try and educate, to try, and at least reach out to public leaders about what next steps should be. So I'm hoping in the future that we actually start to see some change.
Okay, I think we lost Zinzee. Ruana.
Well, what I would like to say is, well, I wanted to mention for finally, like the fact that we haven't gotten a response to our petition, that it has been 3 weeks, and even though, yes, we did say until April 9th, violence, it has been multiple marches, has been multiple speeches being done, and not even an acknowledgement of our petition that we know was received because, I mean, we delivered it, we were there, and there is recording of us doing so. So that's something I would like to bring up. And also, we ultimately, this is not the end. We are not saying that we're making this recommendation and then we're just gonna throw it out in the wind and let it fly. That's not what we're here to do. We have already started thinking about ideas to make another recommendation, to make more petitions, to get more people on board, to expand our reach. It's not just as simple as just writing a document and sending it out. We, as Ty said, we do want to see change. It's not just about young people being passionate. It's not just that. It's deeper than that. This is something that affects all of us. This is something that we have seen since we were children growing up. This is not something new. So why wait when you could be that change?
Mm-hmm. Bevon?
Yes. So I completely agree with what Ru and Ty said. Ultimately, I think people need to understand that these conversations, me speaking right here, right now, even talk is so incredibly cheap. We can talk about our ideas and we can talk about our propositions, but ultimately, if we're not doing anything, it's as vapid as can be, right? We've actually started the work ourselves on the ground. We've received, and that this goes back into what we talked about with institutional support. And people's trust in institutions, because we aren't even a fully fledged organization as yet. And we've received multiple outpourings from people who've been victimized for our support. And we've been doing our best to support and assist people. We've actually already gotten people out of abusive situations. And we have been starting the work without institutional support, without support from our governments or our police or whatnot. We've begun the work on the ground because we know that action begins with us. We know that us talking here is not enough. Us saying, "Oh, we don't believe sexual violence is a good thing," is not enough, right? That is the baseline. That is the bare minimum, and ultimately, action is what we want to see. So we're calling on all the stakeholders again, our government included, to make action. We want to see action from them. We want to hear from them. We would love to have conversations about the things in our petition, for example. How can we feasibly achieve some of these maybe there are methodological critiques. Sure. And we're willing to have those conversations. But those begin not with niceties, not with people saying fluffy words on a stage, not with people making fancy speeches about how they believe in justice for all. It begins with action. And we need to see that from everybody. So that's my closing comments on that.
Yes, and Jacqueline Mackenzie says, great to see such bright young people involved in trying to find solutions to protect women and girls from abuse and violence in Grenada. Well, I'm sure that there will be people who don't fully agree with every detail, even though they agree with your overall goal in bringing an end to or seriously reducing incidents of sexual and gender violence. And there will be those who will say, well, it is more complex, more complicated. There are other sides to the matter in terms of some of the issues they raised, like consent and whether there could be rape in marital relations, and we'll go into that. But I know that there could be those issues. But what I will say, don't let that deter you. I think what you are doing is really admirable. You are confident, and you should advocate your views, and don't be deterred. Out of discussions and out of debate, your own views may evolve. Your own views may in some cases, may even change. But I'm sure that you are doing all of this to really address what is a scourge in our society. And it is so, I echo Jacqueline Mackenzie to say it is so refreshing to see young people addressing an issue as this. And I really want to thank you for coming on tonight and encourage you to continue your great work. Thank you so much for
Thank you so much for having us.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, great. Nice. Thank you to those who viewed the program, and we continue next week. Thank you. And good night.